All right, guys, welcome to part 3. By the time this is uploaded, it's very possible that this work could be kinetic. I thought it was going to happen last week, but it's Thursday. This may go up on the weekend sometime, so hopefully not, but we'll see. But basically, what's happening right now, just to get you caught up from part 2, the United States is essentially saying that Iran has to give up its ballistic missiles, and they have to limit or dismantle their civilian nuclear program. So it went from nuclear program to ballistic missiles again. They have to stop supporting their regional allies, and basically they just have to bend the knee because America is the slave master of the world. So Iran's response right now has been, who's going to make us do this shit? Well, it's going to be you? So that's where we're at right now, right? We have the U.S. empire saying bend the knee, and we have Iran saying no. Iran is like, we don't want war, but if you want it with us, we ready for you, and we not holding back. So that's where this thing gets dangerous. So we're going to go through a couple clips first, and we're going to start with the events that happened in last fall, all up through the winter until, up and until this, I don't know, this past week, everybody's been saying that this is definitely going to happen. So the U.S. wouldn't be positioning its hardware very near Iran if they weren't planning to do something. And I don't know that Trump will tackle out of this one. Let's go to our first clip. It's going to be Tucker, and let's hear what Tucker has to say.
Is that a good reason to topple the existing power structure and just let the country devolve into whatever happens next? Probably not. And the administration hasn't really made that case, or really any case, other than they can't have nuclear weapons. So you can at least feel satisfied that they're not trying very hard to lie to you. They're basically just saying, looks like we could have a war. Because everybody knows the only reason we're having this war is because Israel wants it. This is their last chance, they believe. This presidency is the last presidency where they're going to have unequivocal bipartisan support, period. You can't primary every Thomas Massey, and there's a whole army of them coming at some point because everyone can see what's going on. And you can shut down X, and you can shut down the internet. You can be like Great Britain and arrest people who protest Israel, but attitudes are not going to revert to what they were 5 years ago. Sorry. And they know this. So this is their last chance. What's so amazing is that Israel, which at least is acting in what it perceives to be its own national interest, is joined by its shills in the United States, of course. But really, its only other ally in this is the American news media, whose job it is to tell you the truth and inform you as to what's happening, to tell you, hey, wake up. The world could be changing, and it's going to affect you and your family. That's their job. And instead, they've been lulling you to sleep with the same variety of transparent lies and propaganda.
Yeah, so that was Tucker. And, he's been cooking lately, you know what I mean? Especially after that break from Fox, to be honest with you. But he's been on the right side of a lot of this shit that's happening within MAGA, with the split in MAGA. But so here, we see here Saeed Muhammad. So this is back in January. And he's like, don't be deceived by Western media about Iran. People do not support the rioters. So this is during a time where the color revolution was happening, December, January. The collective West is trying to distract attention from the ongoing Holocaust in Gaza and their full complicity in the greatest crimes of our time. So here's Press TV. Huge crowds are marching toward the resting place of General Soleimani in Kerman to mark the 6th anniversary of his martyrdom. So you had the U.S., the West, literally prancing around the Pahlavis, the Shah's people, wanted to bring them back into power. And I mean, it's just so blatantly obvious what this is about, right? Now, I mean, if we remove emotion and look at the military reality of this whole situation to begin with, it's just, this was probably their last chance at doing this with soft power, right? So let's listen to what Trump has to say here.
Taking out Iran. And speaking of Iran, I hope they're not trying to build up again, because if they are, we're going to have no choice but very quickly to eradicate that buildup. So I hope Iran is not trying to build up, as I've been reading, that they're building up weapons and other things. And if they are, they're not using the sites that we obliterated, but they're using possibly different sites. We know exactly where they're going, what they're doing. And I hope they're not doing it because we don't want to waste the fuel on a B-2. It's a 37-hour trip both ways. I don't want to waste a lot of fuel. Okay?
So the goalposts haven't moved again. So first, the U.S. says it wants Iran to do away with the civilian nuclear program, which is allowed to have under the NPT and the IAEA. And now it's like, no, you can't have ballistic missiles because those ballistic missiles can hit Israel. So basically, this is all about Israel's security. So you're going to send U.S. troops to die to fight for Bibi Netanyahu in the Epstein class. That's basically what this is all about. If Iran shoots and violently kills peaceful protesters, which is their custom, the United States will come to their rescue. We are locked and loaded and ready to go. Thank you for your attention to this matter. President Donald J. Trump. When have you ever believed that the U.S. gave a damn about civilians? It's always ever a pretext, right? So, Associated Press breaking: the U.S. President Donald Trump and top Iran official exchanged dueling threats as widening economic protests swept across parts of the Islamic Republic, further escalating tensions between the countries. And then you have a commenter saying Netanyahu makes one trip to see Trump, and 48 hours later, Trump is ready for another war with Iran. That's exactly what the hell happened. AF Post. President Trump has declared that the United States is locked and loaded and prepared to come to the rescue for protesters in Iran. Craziness. So this is Mel, great follow. And she says Netanyahu touches down in the U.S. on Monday. Democracy protests pop off in Iran on Wednesday. Trump threatens Iran with full-scale war on Friday. They don't even try to hide the puppet strings anymore. And they don't. They don't. The Onion. Netanyahu feeling like trip to U.S. to start World War III went pretty well. And we have here Thomas Massey. So he quote treated that Trump tweet about killing protesters and how the U.S. is locked and loaded. And this is what Thomas Massey had to say. He said, "We have problems at home and should not be wasting military resources on another country's internal affairs." Makes sense. That's 100% true. Military strikes on Iran require congressional authorization, which is correct. The threat isn't about freedom of speech in Iran. It's about the dollar, oil, and Israel. 100%. And here's Glenn Greenwald. In case you're wondering why three fanatically pro-Israel oligarchs, Miriam Adelson, Paul Sanger, and John Paulson, are single-handedly funding the campaign to remove Republican Thomas Massey from Congress, see that tweet that I just went over. All right. So this is the Wall Street Journal opinion. We don't have to go through this and spend much time on it, but it's basically on how fractured Iran may not be so bad. So in other words, they're trying to warm the readers up to, for a regime change. That's what they're saying. So, it won't be so bad. You know what I mean? This is the type of, regime change porn and empire porn that they try to prep their citizens with. So let's rewind real quick. All right. Because Iran is obviously threatening the United States because look at how close they're putting their country to U.S. military bases, right? So in 2002, the Pentagon ran a huge war simulation called Millennial Challenge. It cost them about $250 million to do. They had the red team playing Iran, and they had one general in charge of that side. And what happened was the U.S. lost, all right? And they lost in a matter of hours. So what happened was this general had swarm speedboats. They had ground-based missile launchers. They had commercial ship concealment. They had no radio communication to avoid detection. They used no radio communication to avoid detection. And they used asymmetric tactics against the other team, the blue team. So a simulated U.S. fleet was the blue team, all right? And that was the one that was defeated and overwhelmed by those tactics, right? So that was 2002. So technology has evolved since then. And now I think we're at the point like Iran has spent like 20 plus years studying how to fight the United States asymmetrically, right? They don't need to win a conventional war against the United States. They just need to make it as costly as possible for the U.S. to wage war against them. So on the other hand, the U.S. loses by not winning. Iran wins by not losing. That's a much better position to be in, right? So I want to bring your attention to why these color revolution protests even popped off to begin with. And I want to talk about a clip from Scott Bessent, right? And this is Max Blumenthal commenting. He says the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent boasts that sadistic U.S. sanctions deliberately devalued Iran's currency, and this is why Iranians took to the streets. This is economic statecraft. No shots fired, Bessent added, or I would say he bragged. One of the most important confessions in the U.S. war on Iran. So this is how white supremacy, this is how the Western world works. They control the finance system. And they can create great pain for ordinary people just because they want those people to rise up and overthrow the government that they don't like so they can put their people in. These are the people, these are the statecraft. These are the people that think they're in charge of the planet. Let's listen to what he has to say, Scott Bessent.
What do you want to say about sanctions, something else you've been working on, of course? What are you planning there in terms of Iran and the impact there? Do sanctions actually work? And the same question with regard to 500% secondary sanctions or tariffs on countries who purchase energy products from Russia.
Okay, so two things there. There are Treasury sanctions. And if you look at a speech that I gave at the Economic Club of New York last March, I said that I believe the Iranian currency was on the verge of collapse, that if I were an Iranian citizen, I would take my money out. President Trump ordered Treasury and our OFAC division, Office of Foreign Asset Control, to put maximum pressure on Iran, and it's worked. Because in December, their economy collapsed. We saw a major bank go under. The central bank has started to print money. There is a dollar shortage. They are not able to get imports, and this is why the people took to the street. So this is economic statecraft. No shots fired, and things are moving in a very positive way here.
So economic statecraft is the use of economic tools. You might have heard of some of these economic tools, such as sanctions, trade agreements, tariffs, foreign aid, investments, loans, export controls, and manipulating these things to achieve a foreign policy or national security goal, right? So the foreign policy goal here was to destroy Iran economically, right? It didn't work, but the fact that this is what they're trying to do, it shows you that they have a hard on for this country. They want this country destroyed bad. Right? So let's listen to the base Dr. Jeffrey Sachs.
This was another piece of the chaos. I think there was another part of Davos that should get more attention than it's gotten, and that was an interview by the U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on Fox Business News. It was extraordinary because it explained another thing that you and I have spoken about and that I've been posting about, and that's what's going on in Iran. Because Scott Bessent let the cat out of the bag. He said this is a regime change operation. The idea is for the U.S. to crush the Iranian economy. If you or I were to say that 2 days ago or 3 days ago, oh no, you must be an Iranian apologist. You must be trying to exculpate the Iranian regime from all its corruption and so on. But let me just read a little bit of what Bessent said. He was asked by the interviewer, Maria Artiromo, what do you want to say about sanctions? Something you've been working on, of course. What are you planning there in terms of Iran and the impact there? Do sanctions work? So Bessent says, okay, there are Treasury sanctions. And if you look at a speech that I gave at the Economic Club of New York last March, I said that I believed the Iranian currency was on the verge of collapse, that if I were an Iranian citizen, I would take my money out. President Trump ordered Treasury and our OFAC division, that is the Office of Foreign Asset Control, to put maximum pressure on Iran. And it's worked, because in December, their economy collapsed. We saw a major bank go under. The central bank has started to print money. There is dollar shortage. They are not able to get imports. And this is why the people took to the streets. So this is economic statecraft. No shots fired, and things are moving in a very positive way here. It's extraordinary. So he explains, yes, this is economic statecraft to crush the Iranian economy. It's war with economic means, completely against international law, against the UN Charter. The sanctions are illegal. And when Scott Bessent says things are moving in a very positive way because of economic collapse, you can see how completely twisted these people are. This really is an evil empire, I have to say, because the idea is destruction of others. Usually we have Treasury secretaries that don't exactly explain these things with all this pride, but Bessent laid it out clearly. I think it also helped me to really underscore why Bessent has his job. He was the hedge fund guy with Soros that attacked the pound sterling. So he's known as the guy who can bring down someone else's currency. What a handy thing to have as your Treasury Secretary. He's not an expert on economic policy, on fiscal affairs, on the state of the American people, nothing about that. But he can bring down a currency. And that was his job in Iran, and he's chortling about this. So there's lots of regime change. Now today in the Wall Street Journal, the headline is that the Cuban government has to fall before the year end. So that's another regime change operation underway. By the way, like you quoted Macron, they didn't say a word. They didn't say a word when the United States was out to crush the regime.
So that was Dr. Jeffrey Sachs. I always follow his commentary. Now, the guy who actually said this, who actually published this tweet, Max Blumenthal, I have a clip from him. Let's hear what he has to say.
On stage in an interview with I don't know if she was your former colleague, Maria Bartiromo,
yes,
of Fox Business, and she asked him about Iran, and he made one of the most revelatory statements I've ever heard a top U.S. official make on the U.S. war on Iran. I don't know if Chris has that clip ready.
We have it, so hold a second. We'll play it, and I'm dying to hear you slice this up. Chris, cut number 14.
What do you want to say about sanctions, something else you've been working on, of course? What are you planning there in terms of Iran and the impact there? Do sanctions actually work? And the same question with regard to 500% secondary sanctions or tariffs on countries who purchase energy products from Russia.
Okay, so two things there. There are Treasury sanctions. And if you look at a speech that I gave at the Economic Club of New York last March, I said that I believe the Iranian currency was on the verge of collapse, that if I were an Iranian citizen, I would take my money out. President Trump ordered Treasury and our OFAC division, Office of Foreign Asset Control, to put maximum pressure on Iran, and it's worked. Because in December, their economy collapsed. We saw a major bank go under. The central bank has started to print money. There is a dollar shortage. They are not able to get imports. And this is why the people took to the street. So this is economic statecraft. No shots fired. And things are moving in a very positive way here.
Can't remember an American official acknowledging that we intentionally devalued the currency of a foreign country in order to make people poor, make people hungry, and drive them into the street.
Well, there it is. And what he's saying is that the current round of what were called protests were triggered by U.S. economic manipulation of Iran's currency, which built on crushing sanctions, 14 years of economic warfare on Iran that have distorted its economy, caused corruption deliberately, forced Iran to export oil through a shadow fleet, subjected Iranian citizens to a kind of financial terrorism where they can't open bank accounts and can't access certain apps. If I want to record an interview in Iran, I can't use StreamYard or Zoom. So finally, they got the dam to burst. Protesters came out. Many of them actually supported their government. There was no repression. The protest started as peaceful. But once they got the protest that they engineered over the currency, then they started to engineer violence. And intelligence agencies from the MI6 to the Mossad began to infiltrate the protests. Many of the protesters were armed. You saw them with weapons. There were extremely violent elements carrying out riots across Iran, burning hundreds of mosques, burning fire stations, attacking bank ATMs, attacking ambulances and first responders, because that will make it more difficult if the U.S. attacks Iran for Iranian municipalities to provide their own citizens with medical care from the injuries they're going to get. And mayhem ensued. So this was the plan. And then they blamed the Iranian government for providing security to its citizens, accusing them of massacres. They faked the death toll, claimed 16,500 were killed on Barry Weiss's CBS News. And the next thing you know, a U.S. carrier group is heading towards the Mediterranean. And I think one might be heading toward, is already in the Indian Ocean, giving Trump options for strikes. All of this started with sanctions. And he's also talking about using tariffs as a form of sanctions. Trump's tariff policy is a form of financial terrorism as well. It has nothing to do with some industrial policy in the U.S. It's now being directed against Russia.
But this...
Okay, so just some insight on how this empire moves, okay? So yeah, this is a look at the naval assets that are in the Middle East right now. Look, they're just surrounding Iran. They have some in the Mediterranean. They got one ship in the Persian Gulf. That one's a sitting duck, and then they have other ones like the USS Michael Murphy, USS McFall, what's that? The Spruance, the Abraham Lincoln. Those are all off the coast in the Arabian Sea. And I think Iran will still be able to hit them. So they don't want to get too close to Iran because they know what'll happen. So I don't think this is going to end well for the U.S. empire, guys. But let's listen to another clip.
Already developed missiles that can threaten Europe and our bases overseas, and they're working to build missiles that will soon reach the United States of America. After Midnight Hammer, they were warned to make no future attempts to rebuild their weapons program, in particular nuclear weapons, yet they continue starting it all over. We wiped it out, and they want to start all over again, and are at this moment again pursuing their sinister ambitions. We are in negotiations with them. They want to make a deal, but we haven't heard those secret words. We will never have a nuclear weapon. My preference is to solve this problem through diplomacy. But one thing is certain, I will never allow the world's #1 sponsor of terror, which they are by far, to have a nuclear weapon. Can't let that happen.
Okay, so we don't even need to litigate the whole nuclear weapon bullshit. That's all propaganda from the CIA. It's just bullshit. Okay, so Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna, they introduced a bipartisan war powers resolution to prohibit involvement in Iran. This is on June 18th, 2025, right? Here's a better look at this. So it said Trump officials say there's a 90% chance of a strike on Iran. He can't without Congress, Ro Khanna said Wednesday in a post on social media platform Twitter X. Representative Thomas Massie and I have a war powers resolution to debate and vote on war before putting U.S. troops in harm's way. I will make a motion to discharge the force a vote on it next week. Okay. Now, when Hakeem Jeffries was asked about this piece of legislation, this war powers resolution, look what he said.
Would you support the Ro Khanna war powers resolution?
I haven't taken a look at it.
Fucking course he hasn't taken a look at it. And you know why he hasn't taken a look at it?
I didn't watch the speech at all. I went to bed before he started, but somehow Max watched the whole thing and got through the whole thing. And he pointed out to me this morning, the private communication, that when Trump made the comments that we just ran, It's the only time that he got a standing ovation from the entire House. The Democrats applauded with him, half of them dressed in white, I gather, for reasons I don't know. The Democrats applauded with him as well. So I'm thinking, is the whole Congress bought and paid for on this issue?
Certainly the Democratic leadership is just like Trump, is Israel first. If you listen to Hakeem Jeffries or Chuck Schumer and try to find a word of protest about Trump's military buildup, his threats against Iran, all they'll say at the most is, as Chuck Schumer said yesterday, is that Trump has to make his case to the American people. This is serious. Not Trump has to seek authority from Congress. This would be wrong. I mean, no, because Chuck Schumer, just as Chuck Schumer sided with Trump and Netanyahu in opposing the JCPOA, Chuck Schumer also supports regime change in Iran. So unfortunately, Trump's march to war is being paved by the complete cowardice of the Democratic Party leadership.
Yeah, the Democrats are in lockstep as usual. It's one big purple party. All right. So CNET, meet the U.S. Navy's new $13 billion aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald Ford. $13 billion. Imagine what we could use that money for. All the social workers, public health people in the audience. What could you use this money for if you were in charge of like reducing all the health disparities, all the poverty, everything in the United States, right? How would you use $13 billion? We know how the U.S. government, the Epstein class, will use $13 billion. They'll use it on an apparatus to go threaten people all over the planet, right? The world's largest warship is headed to Iran with broken toilets. Plumbing issues are wreaking havoc on board the USS Gerald R. Ford as it sails across the Mediterranean. I love this headline by Sabi Sabs. Oh shit. And then Press TV had fun with it too. Shit happens. The $13 billion U.S. Gerald R. Ford sailing toward West Asia amid the U.S. threats against Iran is reportedly crippled by sewage meltdown. 205 breakdowns in 4 days. 4,500 crew in 45-minute bathroom lines and technicians fixing pipes. Wow. Let's look at the footage of this.
The planned U.S. attack on Iran has a hitch. Most of the bomb targeting crew are busy queuing for toilets on the lead vessel, the USS Gerald R. Ford. This is not a joke. A set of emails was obtained by NPR, a US public broadcasting group, revealing that toilet wars have broken out on board the most expensive ship the US Navy ever built. And the Wall Street Journal followed up to confirm the tale today. TLDR summary: there are too few functioning toilets for 4,600 sailors, and the problem is worsening daily. Problem 1, design planners screwed up by including too few toilets for 4,000 plus sailors, leading to 45-minute queues on a daily basis. Problem 2, engineers screwed up by installing a fragile vacuum system in which a single valve breakdown on one toilet can stop all the toilets in an entire department functioning, making the queues even longer. Problem 3, some of the temporary repair operations, such as using an acid flush to clear out calcium buildups, can only be done while the ship is docked. No prospect of that. But with so many toilets out of order, too much pressure is put on the one still working, so the problem will just spread. And the issues have already been mounting for more than a year. A March 18th, 2025 email from the engineering department sent out to all chiefs on the ship said there were 205 toilet breakdowns in 4 days, the NPR reported. Now, the ship is at the heart of US overseas attack operations, working for months in waters near Venezuela to support the abduction of the country's president and the seizing of ships carrying oil to customers around the world. And the ship is now heading the planned regime change operation in Iran. Israel wants a pro-Netanyahu leader installed, as the US has done in many other countries. But how can they attack Iran while staff are queuing for the loo? One result of all this is a war of words between sailors and onboard sewage staff called hull technicians, or HTs. One sewage engineering chief complained that sailors put all sorts of problematic material down the toilets. Even T-shirts were found clogging the pipes. Our sewage system is being mistreated and destroyed by sailors on a daily basis. My HTs are currently working 19 hours a day right now, trying to keep up with the demand. The US taxpayer spent $13 billion on this ship. On the plus side, it would be delightful if the carrier's desperate lack of functioning toilets caused the attack on Iran to be cancelled or postponed. Got to look on the bright side of life, right?
All right. So next we're going to listen to some clips of J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio. This is curated by the guys at Do Dissidents. Shout out to Do Dissidents. So yeah, let's listen to what these guys have to say, making a case for why they need to fight a war of aggression.
War news to get to today. Potentially important talks going on as we speak. Knock on wood, not holding out hope. The reason I'm not hopeful for these Iran talks is as follows. J.D. Vance had his big Colin Powell moment yesterday while on stage with Dr. Oz talking about another scheme to impoverish and immiserate the American people. Here he is talking about evidence that's emerged that Iran is developing a nuclear weapon.
Can you explain to the American people why the United States would need to strike Iran to stop them from getting a nuclear weapon if the United States obliterated their enrichment program last summer?
Well, I'm not going to make any news on Iran today, Caitlin. I'll let the president make those announcements. As you know, he is sending two of his best negotiators to Geneva tomorrow in order to continue to try to strike the best deal possible for the American people. But the principle is very simple. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. If they try to rebuild a nuclear weapon, that causes problems for us. And in fact, we've seen evidence that they have tried to do exactly that. So the president sending those negotiators to try to address that problem. As the president has said repeatedly, he wants to address that problem diplomatically. But of course, the president has other options as well.
I remember when there was reporting that J.D. Vance was one of very few people in Trump's inner circle trying to dissuade him from bombing Iran. I never really bought it, and it seems like even if that did happen, he is falling in line like the good little boy he is. And yeah, I wasn't alone in thinking this was his Colin Powell moment. This became kind of a meme. Oh, wow, another piece of evidence. Yes, indeed. We've seen evidence Iran is trying to rebuild nuclear weapons, says J.D. Vance. We've heard this exact line before. Colin Powell at the UN in 2003. We've seen evidence of Iraq's mobile bioweapons labs, NWMDs. We all remember what happened next. Turned out to be completely false. History about to repeat itself. Yeah, the mobile bioweapons lab. I remember that like it was yesterday. He's like, look, there's a vehicle parked outside this building, and then 5 hours later, it's not there. Oh, well, that could only mean that it's a mobile bioweapons lab.
Yeah, I mean, it's just getting ridiculous, guys. So, J.D. Vance talking about quote unquote evidence, emerged that Iran is developing a nuclear weapon. Come the fuck on, man. Fantastic question by that reporter, though. How are you taking out the nuclear facilities Trump had already bragged about destroying, but now you're saying they're building another nuclear weapon at these same, come on, man. They're not even trying. It's just nonsense. They're not even trying to convince you. You know what I mean? Here's another one of J.D. Vance.
Crystal clear as it could be, Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. That would be the ultimate military objective if that's the route that he chose. That is, of course, what we're trying to accomplish, as the president said, through the preferred route of diplomacy. But it's very simple. We have to get to a position where Iran, the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, cannot threaten the world with nuclear terrorism. And it's very simple. I think most Americans understand that you can't let the craziest and worst regime in the world have nuclear weapons. That's what the president is accomplishing. That's what
the craziest and worst regime in the world. Really? Ask any other country in the world who the craziest and worst regime in the world is. I bet you're going to hear the United States a lot more than you hear Iran or Israel, if there's a difference there. Perhaps that's a difference without a distinction, or a distinction without a difference.
The president has set as our goal. He's going to try to accomplish it diplomatically. But as we all know, Bill, the president has a number of other tools at his disposal to ensure this doesn't happen. He's shown a willingness to use them, and I hope the Iranians take it seriously in their negotiations tomorrow, because that's certainly what the president prefers.
Does that mean the supreme leader has to go?
Man, they are just itching for
it. Well, again, I think the president ultimately will make the decision about how to...
Again, look, I know that we campaigned against doing this, and I know we're about to do it, even though it's not in the national interest to do it. Now, unlike the president, I plan to win 2 more presidential races in my lifetime, and so I can't really act like I'm all in on this, because I know this is awful, and I know this is the opposite of what we were elected to do. So I'm just going to punt and stall and, defer to the president, who's a lame duck. He doesn't have to run for office. Amazing. Just incredible.
Has to go.
Well, again, I think the president ultimately will make the decision about how to ensure Iran does not have a nuclear weapon. But we're sitting down having another round of diplomatic talks with the Iranians, trying to reach a reasonable settlement.
We did that with Saddam too.
Towards what end? Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. It's very simple, Bill. I think the Supreme Leader and everybody in their system should understand it. We've been crystal clear, and we're hopeful that we're able to come to a good resolution without the military. But if we have to use the military, the president, of course, has that right as well.
All right.
Once a country has a nuclear weapon, we are not able to overthrow the government and get them sodomized with a knife.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
That's we call it inside the White House the anal rape with a blade policy.
Yeah.
And if we can't anally rape you with a blade or send people to do it, that's not a position we're comfortable with.
Yeah, that's a threat to our national security.
That's a threat to our security. Once you have a nuclear weapon, we can't do that to you anymore. And that makes us nervous.
Right. Iran enters critical nuclear.
Yeah, fantastic commentary by the guys that do dissidents. That's exactly what this is all about. You know what I mean? Iran was never looking to build a nuclear weapon. I feel like they should now. I think they should rescind the fatwa, and because otherwise the West is just going to keep trying to overthrow them. You know what I mean? North Korea doesn't have to go through this shit. So I think they should rescind this fatwa. And I'm not for nuclear proliferation, but when you have a madman, crazy white supremacist demon child spawn running around the world just trying to fucking bully everybody and destroy everybody and steal their shit, I think you have to at this point. And then the other psychotic thing that it does, the narcissistic thing that the U.S. empire does, it always treats itself as it's the victim, right? They go around threatening the world with nuclear terrorism, and then they create and they talk about Iran is the craziest, worst regime in the world, the worst, most evil regime ever. And they talk about we're the victim because they might have missiles at some point in the future that might be able to travel far to the United States. Get out of here. You got bases all over, all surrounding their country. If anybody has any reason to feel threatened, it's them. Okay. Here's Marco Rubio.
Rubio insisting Iran poses a very great threat to the United States and has for a very long time. They're not enriching right now, but they're trying to get to the point where they ultimately can. I'm sorry, if you lived through the Iraq war propaganda and you believe this, you are just an absolute hopeless moron. Like, if you remember the run up to the Iraq war and what was being said, and you actually take any of this at face value, you are an idiot.
Clear last night that he always prefers diplomacy. But I want you to understand, and everyone should know, that Iran poses a very grave threat to the United States and has for a very long time. They are in possession, first and foremost, after their nuclear program was obliterated, they were told not to try to restart it, and here they are. You can see them always trying to rebuild elements of it. They're not enriching right now, but they're trying to get to the point where they ultimately can.
Trying to get to the point where they ultimately can. So it looks like we have to go to war over that.
The other thing I would point you to, however, is that Iran possesses a very large number of ballistic missiles, particularly short-range ballistic missiles that threaten the United States and our bases in the region and our partners in the region. And all of our bases in the UAE, in Qatar, in Bahrain. And they also possess naval assets that threaten shipping and try to threaten the U.S. Navy. So I want everyone to understand that, and beyond just the nuclear program, they possess these conventional weapons that are solely designed to attack America and attack Americans if they so choose to do so.
So they develop these weapons that are solely designed to attack America, yet they have not attacked America. It's interesting.
And to the soldiers sabotaging the USS Gerald Ford, I just have one message. If you want to go into combat with shit in your pants, we're fine with that.
All right, guys. So Marco Rubio, the typical trope. The U.S., the West is threatened, and we're always the victim. Perpetual claims of victimhood while clearly being the aggressor. Another example, ladies and gentlemen. So we're going to wrap this up, but all I'm going to say is, here's the bottom line. Iran is not Iraq. Okay, this is not 2003, and this will not be a cost-free engagement for the United States. If war happens, it will not be clean, and it will not be quick. All right, the U.S. may want to get in and out, but that's not going to happen. You know what I mean? And I'm interested to see how long the U.S. can keep things going. because I only think they got enough for like a week or two in terms of, well, reports in terms of air defense missiles and things like that. So we're going to see, you know. So what should we be watching? So look for airfield strikes, Gulf state positioning, look for Chinese and Russian ISR activity, look for, Iranian dispersal patterns, look for all that stuff, because once missiles start flying, you don't get the rewind. You know what I mean? So we are either witnessing a whole bluff, or this is the opening moves of something much bigger. And that's what people seem to be thinking is going to happen this week. All right. Or at least probably by Friday when the market's closed. So this next week or two will tell us a lot. All right. Well, let's look at a couple more clips and then we're going to wrap this up.
Decide to pursue the capability, they are 10 years out from making it a reality. A U.S. official told NBC News that Iran has been building toward an ICBM for years and making advances, but that there was no indication of dramatic new progress. All right. So you want to really hear a perfect distillation of the argument for regime change war in Iran. This went kind of viral this morning for good reason. What's this guy's name? Mark Wayne Mullen. Yeah, I knew he had one of those weird names, Mark Wayne. So Caitlin Collins asked him a very basic question here. If we obliterated Iran's nuclear program last summer, then why are you worried about it right now? And he says, because they're rebuilding it, and you can see they're rebuilding it. So I guess according to this logic, we just have to bomb Iran every 8 months because they can rebuild their nuclear program in 8 months. This is really the case for permanent war that he's making, whether he realizes it or not.
The Ayatollah is going to continue to try to rebuild the system that he said he wasn't going to do. That's why we ended the 12-day war, because they said they were done trying to build a nuclear weapon, yet they're obviously trying to rebuild it.
Right,
we're not going to let that happen.
If we obliterated it, we being the United States last summer, then why are you worried about it right now?
Because they're rebuilding it, and you can see them rebuilding it.
But it was
not
obliterated.
enriching. Well, but it doesn't mean you can't rebuild. I mean, people have car accidents and obliterate their bones in their legs, and yet they can still put metal back in them and walk.
But if it was obliterated in June, how is it February, and we're now, as Steve Witkoff put it, a week away from Iran having this?
I don't know. I can't speak for Steve. I haven't got those reports. And
Steve Witkoff's obviously a liar, but the point is we have to bomb Iran every 8 months in perpetuity. Otherwise, they're going to develop a nuclear weapon. I mean, that's the point he's making. And as you can see, doing a really piss poor job of making what is a moronic point, even if he made it flawlessly.
I've been read in on some of these programs, and so I don't know what Steve was looking at. I don't say he's wrong or right. I just haven't seen those reports. I do know that the president said that they had 10 to 15 days.
I do know that he went to Epstein's Island after saying that he hadn't ever been alone with him after 2005.
Oh, you're talking about Lutnick, not Witkoff.
Yeah. Oh, Witkoff.
You mixed it up. Yeah. You mixed them up.
I always mix those two up.
Yeah, well, they have similar accents. They're New York guys.
They're New York guys, and they're like completely amoral advertisements for anti-Semitism. So they're very easily interchangeable.
Easily interchangeable. That's right. By the way, didn't Witkoff say they're a week away? I mean, the thing about saying they're a week away from having a nuclear weapon, that is a statement with a short shelf life, because I think he made that statement like 4 days ago. So that means what? They're almost halfway there by now? I mean, shouldn't they basically have one if it were they were a week away?
They're almost halfway to being allowed to dictate the future of their own country.
Yeah, exactly.
Reports. I do know that the president said that they had 10 to 15 days. The president doesn't bluff to stop pushing forward with rebuilding their nuclear sites. And by the way, if it takes us removing the Ayatollah from keeping the nuclear program from moving forward, then that's not off the table. But we would prefer diplomacy. The reason why the president has put so much resources in the region is because he wants options, and Chairman Kane is providing those options for him.
2026.
Okay. Well, Gen X girl tweets back at Caitlin Collins. Well, Caitlin, if you actually did your job, you would learn where Mullen is getting his talking points. And this is really what it comes down to. This is why all these people sound so ridiculous trying to justify this to the American people as if it's our war to fight. This is Israel's war to fight, and they're demanding that we fight it for them, or at least play the lion's share of the role. And that's obvious to any thinking person what's going on. It's obvious, I think, to the average person what's going on. For a country that lived through the Iraq war, and for a country that saw George Bush's favorability rating go from 70% at the beginning of the war to 26% by the time he left office, those are not scars that ever fully heal. And that is why it is perfectly obvious to the average person that this is a giant crock of shit. It's why they're too lazy to even get their shit together. You got Witkoff saying they're a week away. This guy's like, yeah, I don't know. I haven't heard that. But, just because we obliterated it 8 months ago, that doesn't mean we don't have to go in again. What you're making there is the case for permanent war. It's incoherent. It's incoherent because there is no coherent case for this. This is Israel's war. Everybody knows it. And
100%. So we're going to finish this up by listening to two other clips by Dr. Jeffrey Sachs. And then, we'll see where everything goes from here, guys. Yeah, we're definitely on the precipice of war. By the time this goes up, we might already be there. But so let's listen to what Dr. Sachs has to say.
let me get it right, in 2005, I think it is, and started reading the papers. And Fritz, as he describes in this book called Deadly Betrayal, says, holy shit, this is a PR war. This is an inside job of Israel. We're fighting for Israel. And fight is the connection. And he asked me to declassify these papers. I'm reading all of this. I'm seeing all of this. This is a war that they had to figure out how to sell a phony war to the American people. So when you raise that point, it's a great point. It's a great analogy. Right. These are not wars fought because we don't know what Iran is doing. These are wars where they're searching for some explanation that can say to Trump's base, why am I doing the opposite of what I promised you? Why am I doing a war that has nothing to do with America's interest, that has nothing to do with make America great again, that is purely for Israel? Why am I doing this? So they're searching for some answer. And then Trump says, oh, they're developing ballistic missiles to attack the United States. Again, there are words I'd like to use on your show that are utterly deserved by such comments. Even our mainstream, lamestream media, which basically never reports anything truthful because they follow the government propaganda, is saying in the last couple of days, no, this is not true. So the lies are just pouring out right now. This is terrible. And I don't know whether there'll be a war, but there very well could be one by the time, we're finished talking, or by tomorrow morning when we wake up, or whatever.
Yeah. So none to add there to what Dr. Sachs had to say, but here's another clip of the same interviewer. And
let me get it right, in 2005, I think it is, and started reading the papers. And Fritz, as he describes in this book called Deadly Betrayal, says, holy shit, this is a PR war. This is an inside job of Israel. We're fighting for Israel. And fight is the connection. And he asked me to declassify these papers. I'm reading all of this. I'm seeing all of this. This is a war that they had to figure out how to sell a phony war to the American people. So when you raise that point, it's a great analogy. Right. These are not wars fought because we don't know what Iran is doing. These are wars where they're searching for some explanation that can say to Trump's base, why am I doing the opposite of what I promised you? Why am I doing a war that has nothing to do with America's interest, that has nothing to do with make America great again, that is purely for Israel? Why am I doing this? So they're searching for some answer. And then Trump says, oh, they're developing ballistic missiles to attack the United States. Again, there are words I'd like to use on your show that are utterly deserved by such comments. Even our mainstream, lamestream media, which basically never reports anything truthful because they follow the government propaganda, is saying in the last couple of days, no, this is not true. So the lies are just pouring out right now. This is terrible. And I don't know whether there'll be a war, but there very well could be one by the time, we're finished talking, or by tomorrow morning when we wake up, or whatever.
So yeah, guys, going to leave it here for now. If this war is started by the time this video is uploaded, I'll be back immediately next week with another video detailing, any kinetic action. But definitely want to get this out because since that 12-day war, there's been a lot of sanctions, posturing. The U.S. is wanting to engage in negotiations, which aren't really negotiations. They want to engage in bend the knees. Just we dictate the terms and you just accept it. And Iran is like, no. They tried to do a color revolution again. That failed. They had a lot of their assets inside Iran. They blew their cover for that one. Set them back for forever in terms of soft power. So what are they going to do? They had to go hot war kinetic, right? They have to. It's the only way. It's the only other option. But the thing is, Iran can fight back and they can hurt them bad. But the thing is, the U.S. empire is damned if it damned if it doesn't. It has to get a cash injection. It has to steal somebody's shit. They're trillions of dollars in debt. Without a bailout, it's a wrap for the West, right? It's a wrap for the United States. They got to go in and steal somebody's shit. They got to get a fast cash injection, right? But then if they don't do anything, the whole rest of the world is able to, they won't have the monopoly on violence anymore. In fact, they already don't. You know what I mean? And if they just sit idly by, they will just waste away and this empire will just like deflate under its own weight. So the U.S. had to do something and it looks like it's choosing to go the kinetic route because it's no way that they put all this military hardware off the coast of Iran if it wasn't going to do anything about it, anything with it, So anyways, like, share, subscribe. See you for part 4 whenever that arrives. If anything happens this weekend, it'll be next week. If anything happens the week after, it'll be the following week. But we shall see. In any event, see you guys next time. Peace.